Although it's not on the list of places Lara visited in the 1996 debut entry Tomb Raider, Los Alamos in New Mexico is the first ever location to be shown in the franchise. The first cut scene comes in the form of a flashback and takes us back roughly 50 years in time to when the US government launched a nuclear bomb in Los Alamos County for testing purposes in 1946. This happened in the context of the infamous Manhattan Project, a research and development project that produced the first nuclear weapons during World War II and was led by the United States, Canada, and the UK. Suspecting the barren deserts of New Mexico to be the perfect place for their experiments, they couldn't have possibly known that during the course of the explosion, they would release a mysterious age-old captive that was locked away in the immediate area thousands of years ago from a cryogenic prison cell. This individuum would play a major key role in the Tomb Raider universe soon enough. Back to the year 1996, where Lara Croft, aristocratic adventurer, is currently busy doing historical research on a certain artifact in Calcutta, India, that is to be revealed much later in the series. Before she's able to make any further breakthroughs, she's interrupted by an old colleague/rival, Larson Conway, who meets up with her to introduce her to Jacqueline Natla, CEO of Natla Technologies, a major technology company based in Los Angeles.
You know, creator of all things bright and beautiful.
Seal it, Larson.
After learning about a peculiar ancient relic called the Scion that is said to be entombed together with its bearer, a king by the name of Qualopec, underneath the fabled Inca city of Vilcabamba in the Peruvian Andes, Lara agrees to go fetch it for the dubious businesswoman.
How quickly can you get to Peru?
Arriving on top of one of the cold, high mountain ranges of Peru's southern Andes near the Cuzco region, together with her local guide, Lara soon stumbles upon what seems to be a giant stone gate carved into the rocks. Examining it closer reveals that the hieroglyphic symbols attached to the 16th century gateway aren't solely of Inca origin, but are most likely the result of two or more merging native cultures, as they show what might be traditional Inca symbolism, as well as glyphs from the Chimu culture that inhabited Peru much earlier and was later conquered by the Inca people. One of these hieroglyphic carvings appears to be that of a stylized bird, which was a very popular motif of Chimu art. We will encounter some of the art of the Chimu civilization, including this peculiar-looking bird, again deeper inside the cave behind the gate at a later point. This accumulation of various architectural and historical periods is evidence of the activities of a more obscure culture that predated ancient civilizations as we know them. That said, it's safe to assume that Natla's coordinates were right, and this marks the entrance to Vilcabamba, which is said to be the legendary last settlement of the Inca people and their final refuge from the Spanish conquistadores. The Incan Empire was the largest empire in pre-Columbian America that arose sometime in the early 13th century and lasted around 300 years before it was conquered by the Spanish. Its capital was located in the modern-day city Cuzco, which is where Lara started her journey up into the Andes. Their last town, Vilcabamba, was established by the leader of the Neo-Inca Empire, Manco Inca Yupanqui, who was originally crowned by the conqueror Francisco Pizarro, who later was responsible for the ultimate downfall of the native empire in the late 1500s. Here is where real-life archaeological evidence and the fictional universe of Tomb Raider first start diverging. The location of Vilcabamba has been lost to history for centuries, until in 1892, 3 men from Cuzco rediscovered the site not far from their hometown. During the following 100 years, the ruins were commonly accepted as the historical site of Vilcabamba. However, our Tomb Raider Vilcabamba is located way higher and possibly to the south of Cuzco, way up in the southern Peruvian Andes. According to Natla's information, the Inca population built their settlement inside an underground cavern, which is also where she assumes Qualopec's tomb and his relic is located. Lara is not yet aware of the true origins of the Scion artifact or its creators and what role Qualopec played in the history of the Inca and their predecessors. However, knowing that the lineage of the Incas ended after their defeat in Vilcabamba, and considering the outlandish myths surrounding the fabled king, it's clear that he has to be much older and stem from a completely different culture altogether. After making her way deeper into the caverns, Lara soon discovers the remnants of Vilcabamba in the form of houses, storage places, and even an old well. The ruins are incredibly well preserved given that they have stayed hidden for over 400 years. Lara keeps delving into the caves, avoiding spike traps and arrows incorporated into the corridors of the architecture to keep the Spaniards out, and ultimately ends up in a huge space with a waterfall forming a small lake in its centre. This site would be intriguing enough on its own, but what really catches Lara's attention immediately is an elaborate contraption and scaffolding surrounding the natural formation, which is made up of cogs, ropes and levers. It quickly becomes clear that all this was put there to stop the strong current of the underground river and separate the waterfall stream so that a small passageway behind it could be accessed. It's unlikely the Inca people found the place with all the machinery or even built the mechanism themselves. The more reasonable approach is probably that the Spanish came up with it in order to rob the tomb that lies behind the waterfall. The reason why they weren't successful in doing so greets our heroine right around the corner when she steps outside into a vast, isolated ecosystem covered in lush flora that usually occurs only in South American rainforests. However, it's not the plants that got to the conquerors, the dinosaurs did. Yup, dinosaurs. As it turns out, the uncharted underground jungles are home to at least 2 extinct species of them, one of which are the velociraptors, and the other the slightly more intimidating Tyrannosaurus rex. To explain why these Jurassic creatures still roam the Earth in this secluded spot, we'll have to go far afield, revealing what kind of cryptic civilization we're actually dealing with here. Qualopec, whose tomb is supposedly right around the corner, was one of the fabled rulers of the even more fabled sunken kingdom of Atlantis that has been mentioned in myths and stories as far back as time can tell. A common theory says that the ancient civilization inhabiting the lost continent shaped and influenced many others at the time and those who came after them, but when a catastrophe hit them, all their knowledge was lost. One of the more well-known historians describing the ancient landmass was the Greek philosopher Plato, who went as far as to come up with a plausible location of where the kingdom must have been located. Granted, most people assume that Plato's Atlantis was just a made-up fictional device, created as a metaphor for one of his many works in which he wants to showcase the superiority of Greek naval warfare. Now, what does all this have to do with dinosaurs, you ask? Diverging from Plato's version of the ancient superpower and delving deeper into archaeological evidence and the properties of the relic that Lara is supposed to track down, it becomes clear that the Atlantean civilization was in fact very real and very powerful. So powerful, in fact, that with the help of the Scion, they may have been able to genetically alter DNA in a way to recreate creatures that had long been extinct and personally mess with biological evolution, which would explain their superior might in contrast to the other less developed cultures at the time of their existence. After dealing with the dinosaurs, Lara is quickly convinced of this truth herself when she steps into the ancient Tomb of Qualopec behind the previously opened waterfall and sees it with her own eyes. The architecture resembles that of pre-Columbian native population. However, the further she sets foot into the halls, the more strange and out of place it becomes. In one of the side chambers of the tomb, we can see the remains of the aforementioned Chimu culture again, in the form of the stylized bird carving that was seen on the big stone gate at the entrance of the cave. This well-preserved artwork resembles the typical art style of the Chimu people. Some of their work can still be seen today in their ancient capital of Chanchan, near the modern city of Trujillo in northern Peru. The Chimu bird carving is not the only evidence of older cultures present in the tomb that predated the Incan Empire. In the entrance hall of the tomb, we can see 4 tall, eerie statues looking down at us. These statues bear a striking resemblance with the so-called Atlantis found at Tula, an archaeological site in the Mexican state of Hidalgo. They represent warriors of the Mesoamerican Toltec civilization that dominated parts of ancient Mexico in the post-classic period from about 900 AD to 1168 AD, so approximately 200 years before the Incan Empire rose to power in Peru. This suggests yet again that Qualopec's own civilization has shaped many more to come after him. Then finally, in the middle of the main chamber, the mythical king of Atlantis himself resides on an eerie skeletal-formed throne, being the not-so-living proof that the precursor civilization actually existed. More importantly, however, the adventurer finds the ancient device that she was sent to retrieve sitting on a decorated pedestal right in front of Qualopec. She takes the peculiar-looking disc with her and exits the tomb, only to be ambushed by Larsen, who reveals to be working as a soldier for hire for Jacqueline Natla, who was sent after the aristocrat to relieve her of the relic as soon as she got her hands on it. The two of them engage in a gunfight, and after defeating the mercenary, Lara is rightfully curious about the origins of the artifact and the civilization surrounding it now that she's aware of its existence. She asks Larsen for more information, who reluctantly admits that what she found was only one piece of the Scion, and that another one of Natla's henchmen was sent out to collect the second one.
Makes no difference to me. Pierre's probably already found his piece.
Pierre Dupont? Where?
Now that I don't know.
After the exciting discovery in Peru, Lara follows Larsen's lead and travels to the Natla Technology headquarters located in Los Angeles, California. She decides to pay her rival an unexpected visit by breaking into the skyscraper at night and storming her offices through the ceiling. What she finds there isn't the CEO herself, but a ton of research scattered around the room that has seemingly been left behind in a rush. From the looks of it, Natla has been studying the Scion and its history carefully and left an old diary written by a Greek Orthodox monk lying around on her desk for Lara's convenience. Reading through the monk's memoirs, the treasure hunter learns that he was relocated to a monastery named St. Francis Folly, perhaps due to Turkish raiders invading the Thessaly territory in the late 15th century.
Relocated now to St. Francis's Folly, new temptations torment me. Rumour amongst
my fellow brothers is that entombed beneath our monastery is the body of Tihocan, one of the three legendary rulers of the lost continent Atlantis, and that with him lies his piece of the Atlantean Scion, a pendant divided and shared between the three rulers, which curbs tremendous powers. Powers beyond the Creator himself. I too sweat at such possibilities, lying so close to my mortal self. Each night, I beat myself rid of these fantasies, but it is indeed a test.
The religious man writes about another fabled king of Atlantis named Tihocan being buried deep beneath the friary, which is all the clues Lara needs to head out to Greece and find the ancient tomb. Arriving at the Meteora, a complex of medieval monasteries built on top of natural sandstone rock pillars at the northwestern edge of the plain of Thessaly, near the Pineus River and Pindus Mountains in central Greece, she climbs her way up the formation to reach St. Francis's monastery. We don't know for certain if this religious structure was dubbed after St. Francis of Assisi, who is certainly the most famous saint bearing that name and who lived and worked a few centuries before the place was likely built, but having an Orthodox monastery named after a Roman Catholic friar feels a little out of place. What seems to be a plain, typical 15th century cruciform abbey from both the outside and the inside soon is revealed to actually hold a secret staircase deeper down into the mountains beneath it. Interestingly enough, the Byzantine hermits weren't the first people to inhabit the rock formation. Several caves throughout it and the surrounding landscape were in fact home to humans more than 40,000 years ago, as suggested by archaeological evidence. What Lara is about to find as she descends deeper into mankind's lost history aren't the remains of earliest Homo sapiens, however, but something much more fascinating. The monastery is connected to several layers of Greek history, dating all the way back to archaic times, possibly covering some of the infamous Greek Dark Ages, of which so little is known, and perhaps even containing architecture of the Mycenaean Empire that predated this era and which most of ancient Greek culture is built upon. The deeper we delve into the ancient ruins, the older the architecture and evidence of previous cultures become, suggesting that whoever first started building structures inside the mountain started at the very bottom and the following civilizations built on top of it. In the first structure that features art and architecture from Greece's classical and Hellenistic periods that dated from about 500 BC to 300 BC and 300 BC to 30 BC respectively, Lara finds various rooms dedicated to a list of Greco-Roman gods at the very top of the structure, immediately beneath the monastery. Among the mythical figures' sanctuaries are the Greek god of the sea Poseidon, or Neptune in Roman mythology, Atlas, an astronomical titan god that is said to have ties with Atlantis itself, Damocles, found in a series of books published around 45 BC, and the Greek king of the gods, Zeus himself. Delving deeper down, Lara also stumbles upon an amphitheatre that's likely to be associated with the same epoch. Although the Romans were typically more known for their magnificent theatres, the Greeks of the classical and archaic times did build their own fair share of the cultural structures. One of the most famous examples is the symmetrical theatre of Epidaurus, a small city on the Argolid Peninsula, designed by Polykleitos the Younger in the 4th century BC, which is still used for dramatic performances today. Moving on, what the adventurer discovers next is something worth noting. Surrounded by a small garden and in close proximity to a very peculiar pool is a shrine with a statue of the mythical king Midas. Although Midas was a common name for at least 3 rulers of the ancient Frisians, an Indo-European people located in Anatolia that rose to power in 800 BC, the depicted king is likely to be the fabled one remembered in Greek mythology for his supposed power to turn everything he touches into gold. The existence of this statue is proof that we're now located in an even more ancient area, which dates back to a period known as the Greek Dark Ages, from 1100 BC to 800 BC. However, this is still not the oldest detail to be found in this section of the ruins. Turning our attention to the before-mentioned pool, we can see something extremely rare and very strange. The walls of the pool are covered by a beautiful ancient fresco depicting dolphins and fish. This fresco is undoubtedly related to the Minoan civilization, an ancient culture ruling over the Mediterranean Sea from the island of Crete during the Bronze Age. The most famous depiction of one of the epoch-defining artworks is one found at the ruins of the ancient Minoan capital Knossos on Crete. The dolphin fresco dates back to the period known as Late Minoan that was present in the 15th and 16th centuries BC and is an example of marine-style Minoan art. The last big structure Lara encounters inside the bottom of the mountain is a ginormous old cistern with a system of aqueducts and a couple of flooded tunnels connecting the various rooms that are covered in sewage grids. The age of these ruins is one big mystery, and not even their purpose is clear. Cisterns were and are typically used to store water or other liquids and catch rainwater in most cases. However, this particular cistern seems to work as some sort of sewage system at the same time, being connected to all the rooms and buildings above. What is worth noting is the cistern is located above an underground lake and the water flows directly into it. The question arises whether the lake is natural or the water from the cistern found its way down below and formed it artificially. The ancient Greeks must have built the place either as a storage for water that was flooded at some point in time, as a sewage system where all the water from the top floors would drain off, which would explain the various flooded tunnels and draining grids, or as both a cistern and a sewer at the same time. All of this vast accumulation of architecture and cultures was primarily built for one purpose: to hide away and honour the ruler that predated them all, King Tihocan of Atlantis. Like his co-ruler Qualopec, he was buried at the very bottom of the formation, thousands of years prior to when the Mycenaean world that would later shape ancient Greece rose to power and would be worshipped and honoured by generations to come. Lara literally gets to the bottom of it all and finds the Tomb of Tihocan, which is located inside a small temple within the aforementioned underground lake, which is connected to the cistern above through a couple of streams.
Here lies the god king Tihocan, one of the triumvirate, keepers of the 3 pieces of the Scion, leader of the Chosen after the great betrayal caused Atlantis to be lost beneath the waves.
Arriving inside the temple, rival treasure hunter and Natla's henchman Pierre Dupont awaits her, only to meet his own end inside the ancient burial site. On the wall next to the giant engraved sarcophagus, the adventurer then finds a fresco depicting the doom of the Atlantean continent. The painting shows several figures in turmoil as a meteorite crashes into Atlantis, causing the sea to swallow it whole. Next to this scene, 3 pieces of the Scion are shown, one of which is greyed out. Lara translates the writing on the wall from what is either the so-called Linear A writing system, a mostly undeciphered language used by the Minoan culture of ancient Crete, which was originally discovered by archaeologist Sir Arthur Evans, or the subsequent Linear B script that was used by the latter Mycenaean culture. The writing further enhances what is depicted, explaining how the Atlantean rulers spread across the globe after their home was destroyed by natural forces. This could have been caused by a number of factors. Perhaps the continent sunk due to massive volcanic eruptions or tectonic shifts, causing the ocean to swallow it whole. A meteorite crashing onto the land could also have been possible. After his homeland and culture had been annihilated, Tihocan moved to the Balkans, but was unable to hand down his civilization's advanced knowledge to the people of ancient Greece, who continued to honor and possibly worship him for his superior wisdom. A bigger portrayal of what appears to be the king is also seen on the fresco, where he is depicted in a stance that was usually exclusively used by ancient Egyptians for the proper burial of royal mummies. Male pharaohs were entombed with their right arms crossed above their chest, holding a flail in their right hand and a crook in their left, as a gesture of respect towards Osiris, their god of the afterlife, who was commonly depicted in the same way and who they believed they would meet after death. Seeing the king, an Atlantean ruler who predated Egypt's advanced civilizations by thousands of years, depicted like this, once again suggests that his own culture had shaped many others throughout the Mediterranean region, similar to Qualopec's influence on ancient Meso and South American history. After obtaining the second fragment of the Scion, Lara follows the monk's assumption about how there were in fact 3 rulers of Atlantis, and each of them possessed their own piece of the pendant. However, knowing now that the inscription in the tomb mentions only 2 just rulers, and one of the fragments being greyed out on the fresco, all evidence points to the fact that the final piece was stored away safely from the 3rd king, who was apparently considered a traitor after having caused a great tragedy. Combining the clues from Natla's and her own research, Lara figures out that the last piece is located in an ancient sanctuary in Egypt that has since been swallowed by the sands of the desert. She travels there without further ado in her race against Natla, not yet knowing that the businesswoman has far more sinister ambitions. Lara arrives at the entrance of a rather big cave somewhere in a very secluded area of Egypt, where she parks her motorcycle and ventures forth on foot. It's unclear where this mysterious cavern is located, although some research and historical knowledge of the area suggests that it might be situated somewhere along one of the many so-called wadis, an Arabic term referring to a valley or dried-up riverbed in Upper Egypt, one of the 2 halves of the ancient kingdom stretching from its capital city of Thebes all the way down to the border of Nubia, the ancient name for what is considered Sudan today. Most of these wadis are found throughout the eastern Egyptian desert, all the way to the coast of the Red Sea. Some of them contain archaeological evidence of the earliest human settlements and populations in the North African regions. Other areas that might come into question are located at the west banks of the Nile in Upper Egypt, which have been inhabited by the so-called Nakada cultures, early Egyptian civilizations dating back to pre-Pharaonic times, so these spots would make another perfect candidate for any Atlantean remnants. Lara makes her way into the unknown territory and soon digs up her first clues, revealing that she is indeed in close proximity to something ancient and forgotten, namely the fictional lost city of Kharmoon. What she finds here are remains of ancient Egypt's golden times, dating back to what's known as the New Kingdom, an empire that was active between 16th century BC and 11th century BC, famous for its popular pharaohs like Tutankhamun, Nefertiti and Ramses the Great. Remembering her past two adventures, however, it soon becomes clear that this is not the only period of Egypt's history that's buried in these sands. Before making her way deeper underground into the submerged structures, she stumbles across something very interesting in one of the elevated floors. This beautiful statue of the goddess Bastet in the form of an elegant cat resembles a more famous exemplar, namely the Geyer Anderson cat, which was donated to the British Museum by its former owner, Major Robert Grenville Geyer Anderson, who bought the cat from a merchant in Cairo in 1934 and brought it home with him. Although archaeologists and Egyptologists alike are not completely able to carbon date the statue, it's said to originate from the archaeological site of Saqqara and date back to the 7th century BC. This would suggest that the cat Lara discovers in Kharmoon stems from about the same period of Egyptian history. It's questionable whether it was added by generations that roamed the halls of the sanctuary later, or whether all of its architecture can be traced back to this time, which is more unlikely. When the adventurer makes her way through the sand-filled caverns and rooms of the sunken sanctuary, she discovers more beautiful inscriptions, paintings and furnishings until arriving in an almost completely intact room that contains a colossal underground statue of a sphinx, possibly depicting mythical pharaoh Menes, who might still have remembered the traditions of the fabled Atlanteans. Menes was said to have united the two kingdoms of Lower and Upper Egypt for the first time in history in the early 3rd millennium BC. Looking around the giant cave and seeing depictions of varying gods and goddesses that have been worshipped throughout different eras of Egypt's history makes it clear that this sanctuary was home to hundreds of generations of Egypt's priests and kings who, just like their Greek counterpart, worshipped what the Atlanteans had left behind until its legacy was lost to time and nature's forces. The huge Sphinx statue had been doing a fantastic job at guarding the piece of the Scion buried here millennia ago, until Lara Croft waltzes in and takes it right off its pedestal. Upon exiting the cave with all 3 fragments of the pendant in her possession, the treasure hunter runs into Natla and the rest of her henchmen, who force her to hand them over to the big bad businesswoman before then heading off in her limo. Upon unconventionally boarding the boat, Lara keeps a low profile, and after the villains leave Egypt into the Mediterranean Sea through the Nile Delta, she waits for them to arrive at their destination. The journey across the Mediterranean Sea made it hard for Lara to stay hidden on the yacht, but somehow she managed all right, and even overheard valuable bits of information regarding Natla's plan and where they were headed. When they arrive off the coast of a small remote isle in the middle of the sea and enter the rock through a cavern by boat, Lara can finally get off the yacht and showcase her diving skills as she follows them stealthily. Inside the cavernous island, all signs point to the place being of volcanic activity, judging from the heat and the geological properties. However, what's more interesting is that Natla seems to have been leading a mining operation inside the caves for quite some time, considering all the high-tech mining equipment and the drills that are operating. Making her way into the underground formation, it's revealed that Natla has already unearthed a huge part of what looks to be an ancient civilization's remains, including ruins and pathways, and a huge gate that leads deeper into the volcano. There is no doubt that this is part of the forgotten Atlantean kingdom, possibly dating back 10,000 years and being the ultimate proof that a far older and far more advanced civilization has always been out there. Following its twisted, eerily designed flesh-like corridors into the heart of the structure, Lara encounters a pack of vicious mutants that are hatching from what appear to be cocoons connected to the pulsating walls and ceilings before finally making her way to the top of the building to some sort of throne room overlooking a deep pit filled with the active volcano's lava. Walls, floors and ceilings of the rooms are covered in outlandish patterns and symbolism, probably resembling the Atlantean form of writing. Entering the balcony, the completed Scion becomes visible on top of a pedestal. It's rotating and seemingly active in some way or another. As Lara approaches it, Natla interrupts her yet again.
Back again.
And you? For a grand reopening, I assume.
Evolution's in a rut. Natural selection at an all-time low. Shipping out fresh meat will incite territorial rages again. Will strengthen and advance us. Even create new breeds.
Kind of evolution on steroids, then.
A kick in the pants. Those runts Qualopec and Tihocan had no idea. The cataclysm of Atlantis struck a race of languoring wimps. Plummeted them to the very basics of survival again. It shouldn't happen like that.
Or like this.
The adventurer realizes that it was Natla who doomed the Atlantean race by creating her army of evolutionary enhanced mutants thousands of years ago, and was therefore imprisoned in her cryogenic cell and buried deep in the American continent, where the recent nuclear bombing tests freed her. She had since established one of the most influential businesses on the globe, and with her political and financial powers, she was able to unearth the remains of this Atlantean operating station. All she needed was the reassembled Scion, which was just the kind of job Lara Croft was ambitious and crazy enough to accept. Not having any of Natla's insane plans, the treasure hunter destroys what she spent so much time finding with a single shot of her gun, causing the entire mechanism to malfunction and the volcano to become unstable. After a final showdown and gunning down the mad former queen for good, Lara is able to escape the collapsing caverns and make her way back to the yacht to escape from the explosions. It's unclear how much of the possibly last remnants of the Atlantean civilization is left after the structure caved into the ocean, but it's safe to assume that the Scion and all the knowledge contained within have been destroyed, breaking every last link to the age-old culture and their sciences.